Welcome back to this already, the final segment of The Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price. But you knew that. Talking to you about you and your business. One of my favorite contributors to come on here on this program, Lee Kaplan. He keeps me on my toes. It brings interesting insight and observation of what's happening out there in the and really a lot of just the news front in general, and great insight on what's happening in the legal situation out there. And and now I discover a little bit of the secret to his cleverness. I'm a huge fan of The Economist magazine, and I caught him, in the break room, in the conference room, reading that magazine. And he says it's the thing he likes to give to other people that speaks volumes of the way you think, because it's very unconventional, very consequential. The thing I like about The Economist magazine, it takes a consequential look. It really doesn't care about philosophy, although it's considered more of a conservative bent, but it really doesn't care about philosophy. It cares about, if this happens, this will be the result of what happens. It really doesn't have an axe to grind. And I think that's probably what makes it the most appealing magazine to me. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a great mag, and the motto that they don't express but I think of when I read it is, actions have consequences.
Yes.
And it's good intentions are not enough. When you take action, something's going to happen, and it talks fairly dispassionately about those things. But I'll tell you what I was interested in today. There was a story in the Houston Chronicle today about a lawsuit that I noticed when it was filed last week. It's a lawsuit called Bataccio versus BP. It's against several BP entities, and this is the family of one of the people who was killed when the terrorists stormed that facility in Algeria, a fairly remote facility that BP had, some kind of a petrochemical plant. And the claim is, it was filed in state court, the claim is that essentially he was enticed to go there. BP not only had bad security, but had no plans for the employees, and denied this particular person who, and it's unclear whether he was an employee or some kind of independent contractor hired through some other company, an opportunity to participate in the wireless communication system there, and that led to his death.
Wow.
Really kind of interesting, and there are a few issues that came out of that to me. This is a lawsuit filed in state court. It's against 3 separate BP entities, and the claim is that the parent, BP PLC, which presumably is a UK corporation, essentially, directs all this dizzying array of subsidiaries and affiliates, and that they're all of its agents. But reading the lawsuit brought me to realize a few things. Number one is, when you're dealing with a company that is a worldwide company, often you've signed a contract with some affiliate or subsidiary of that company that may or may not be somebody you would normally be able to sue in your home state, and or may or may not be solvent. And so the plaintiff's attorney in this case, who's a fairly capable attorney I'm familiar with, has sued 3 separate entities. 2 of them seem to be American entities than the parent company. So one thing that comes to mind is, when you sign a contract with one of these international companies, you need to understand who it is you're actually dealing with, who is the actual entity that they have put for the signature line on your contract. Number 2, you need to think about what happens if things go wrong. A lot of the times, large companies will put what's called a forum selection clause in the contract, which means, for example, if you have a complaint, you may have to sue them in Delaware or go to arbitration in New York. And so you need to pay very careful attention to any paragraph that talks about dispute resolution or jurisdiction and venue. Jurisdiction is often it's the question of where someone can be sued, that is, a state or a country, and venue is which particular forum, so that occasionally people will say that you're signing a contract that you have agreed that jurisdiction and venue is proper in the district courts of New York State, even though you may not have much contact with them. So forum selection clause is very, very important. Now, this particular case is kind of interesting because it's clear they made a great effort to keep the case in state district court in Harris County. so that it can't be removed. They've not only sued 3 BP entities, but they've also sued an individual with whom Mr. Bataccio had some interaction, and they've contended that he had a lot to do with Mr. Bataccio's situation. So there's been a decision there that an individual or a family will be a more sympathetic plaintiff and BP a less sympathetic defendant or set of defendants in the state courts of Harris County as opposed to the federal court.
Yeah, by the way, I should have mentioned that Lee Kaplan's with Spicer, Kaplan, and Veselka Law Firm. They've been doing this kind of stuff of business law for a long time, litigation experts extraordinaire, and always delighted to get your insight. What is the, whoever writes his name on there, he personally could find himself liable in that. Is that correct?
I don't know.
I mean, they can try that, though, right?
True, and I don't know that this individual is somebody who's signed any sort of contract, but he is an individual who's been identified by the plaintiffs as being intimately involved in the arrangements that led to Mr. Bataccio being at that plant and ultimately perishing. There's a lot of atmospherics in the petition about BP giving out bad information about how he died and what he died of. That allegedly BP said he died of a heart attack on a given date, but in fact he died on a different date, and that he died because they put a string of explosives around him and essentially it detonated. So
it's hard not to laugh because it's like a heart attack. There's explosives going around all around him. I guess I would have a heart attack too, right?
Right. Well, I don't know if that has anything to do with the true liability, but it's the kind of conduct which clearly the plaintiffs feel should increase the outrage and ultimately the damages awarded to the family. But I just thought it was an interesting case because it's filed in Houston on an event that happened, thousands of miles away against multiple defendants, including an individual, and that there's been a conscious decision to try to keep the case in the state court of Harris County as opposed to the federal court here, which is a larger district. I'm not sure.
And probably a more hostile one, I would think.
That's the thinking. I'm not sure that's true. I think that in general in the Houston area and the entire southern district of Texas, which would be the federal district, people are very well aware of BP's problems. And personally, I think that those districts, the juror pool is relatively similar. There may be a thought that in state court, a judge is much less likely to agree that there are legal hurdles to suing a given defendant, and that might be the thinking behind filing the case in state court and trying to keep it there, because I think both courts are equally prompt now in getting cases to trial.
Interesting.
But the message for a business person or an individual is when you sign these contracts, whether it's a supply contract, purchase order, whatever, you need to be aware of all that fine print, and particularly jurisdiction and venue, for what we call forum selection clauses, where you can enforce your rights or where they may try to sue you or seek relief against you if anything goes wrong with the contract.
Another very quick, because it always seems to go quick, even though we extended our time because it is you. We love having you on here. Time with Lee Kaplan. Phenomenal insight as always. Spicer, Kaplan, and Veselka. Real quickly, kind of tell the audience what your firm does as far as the needs you cover.
Well, our firm handles commercial litigation, all sorts of civil litigation, mainly in Texas, occasionally outside of Texas, ranging from, simple contract disputes, trade secret issues, fraud, occasionally Foreign Corrupt Practices Act litigation or patent litigation. But we have a number of lawyers. I like to think that all the younger lawyers are much more gifted and talented than I. We try to hire really bright people, and they're all people who want to go to trial. So they get cases ready for trial and hopefully try them or resolve them before trial. But our goal is to handle cases efficiently for business people and people who have dealt with businesses and have problems with them.
Very good, very good. SKV.com, that's the website for Smizer, Kaplan, and Veselka. Lee Kaplan been our guest here as usual. He's a regular here on this program, and as always, glad to see you.
Great, it's been fun.
Well,
Thanks.
you bet. When we come back, much more for you on tomorrow's program. Do want to remind you, between now and then, you want to check us out at usdailyreview.com. While there, like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. You've been listening to The Price of Business.